So people often ask us about the difference between our 3 tenor saxophone sample libraries. That's Tenor Colossus, Big Growlin Sax, and the tenor saxophones in Atomic Big Band. So the number one question people want to know is there overlap between these libraries? Are you reusing samples from one to another? And the answer to that is no. There's no overlap between these libraries. They're actually different saxophone players altogether, totally different sessions, totally different performers. And the focus of each one was pretty different as far as what we were trying to get in the instrument itself. So maybe what we'll do is I've got the 3 saxophones loaded. We'll play a phrase in and we can hear the same phrase played by the 3 different saxophones. And then we'll talk about the specific differences between each of the libraries. Okay, so let's just start with Tenor Colossus here. We'll just play something in real time and then we can copy it over to the other instruments and see how they sound different, and that'll give us a chance to talk about all the strengths that each library has. So let's just kind of play. I got Tenor Colossus. Alright, so let's try something here. Okay, so that was real time, obviously. We'll just quantize this for fun, and then I'm going to just stretch them out just to make sure they're all overlapping. Just like to do that to be safe. And then I'll put a legato key switch, and maybe we'll put a fall key switch here. So let's listen to it. We'll switch this over to Smart Delay. Again, for those of you who don't know, we have tons of videos about Smart Delay, which you can watch. I'll put a link here. But essentially, you play it in, and then you turn Smart Delay on, and it analyzes your playing and plays back a really realistic phrase. So. Okay, so let's maybe to kind of show some specifics about Tenor Colossus before we copy it over. This instrument is kind of this was our first saxophone that we made, and the point of this was a kind of workhorse, meat and potatoes kind of tenor saxophone. So it has full dynamic range, piano all the way to forte. And even this first phrase, I bet we'll get some of that subtone sound, really quiet and airy. So let's play it back with the first phrase. This is mod wheel, this modulation right here. So mod wheel controls the dynamics. And so the first phrase will be piano, and then the last phrase will be kind of forte. Let's really crank it. Okay, so let's check that out and see the difference. So you can hear that. So really nice and tender subtone down low, and then a pretty intense forte at the top. Now let's copy this over to Atomic Tenor. So now our Atomic Tenor, again, these are all different players, so we got different performers in the studio to get a specific sound. Obviously, the Atomic series is, you're getting a whole big band with that. So that's kind of about the ensemble sound, but we can hear the difference there. Now, where Tenor Colossus is a full dynamic range, Atomic Tenor is leaning just on the higher end. So it is 2 dynamics, but it's more like a forte or maybe a mezzo forte and then a fortissimo. So really kind of honking loud. So let's listen to that same phrase with Atomic Tenor. We'll turn Smart Delay on. Again, this is the quieter dynamic, which will give you like a mezzo forte and then a fortissimo. So you can hear just a little more edge on these high notes, on the higher velocity, and again they're made to blend with all the other Atomic big bands. So it doesn't have that kind of really quiet sound. So for more exposed solo kind of situations, Tenor Colossus is really, that's kind of what that's for. Obviously you can play ensemble parts with that. Sometimes I'll use Tenor Colossus in an atomic big band situation. So you have tenor sax from atomic and then tenor colossus for tenor 2 or something like that, or vice versa. And they blend really well together, but they're different players, and so that gives you a nice kind of variation. So if I bring this over to big Growlin Sax now, we'll turn this over to smart delay. This is only one dynamic, okay? So the mod wheel on big Growlin Sax changes between non-growl to growl. Okay, so you essentially have one dynamic and the difference is growl versus non-growl. So let's just check out big Growlin Sax by itself. And I've got that soloed, so let's listen to big Growlin Sax. Smart delay needed to be on, but also we heard there we're missing some notes. This points out a kind of another difference here is the range. So we don't have some of these low notes down here on big Growlin Sax. So let's take it up the octave and then we'll talk about range stuff. So here's big Growlin Sax. Okay, so you can hear it has a much more bendy kind of sound. They're bending between notes. This is all performed by the player in real time. Again, it's the same process, sampling process, as all of our smart delay instruments. You know, they're playing a big piece of music and we're extracting the samples from that, and then the smart delay script goes and grabs all these samples. But the approach to the playing is quite different. So I'll just play them in the same octave. You can hear the difference between, so here modulation is basically non-growl and then growl. So you see here the difference, growl, no, non-growl first and then growl. But it's just one dynamic. You still have expression here, so you can change the, you can kind of simulate dynamics with expression, but it is truly just one dynamic recorded. But the growl is actually recorded. It's not faked. This is not some kind of processing. The player played everything twice, but it still has that intense kind of forte sound, heavy vibrato, but non-growl and then growl. So this brought up, since we had to change the range of this brings up the range issue. So if we look at Tenor Colossus and atomic tenor, you can see we have essentially exactly the same range. I'll put these back in real time, but you can see Tenor Colossus goes down to the true lowest note on the tenor sax, the A flat. And we go all the way up to this F sharp. Altissimo, G sharp for them. So it gets into the altissimo range a bit. So you definitely have some high range stuff. You have a big range of the saxophone here. Atomic tenor is exactly the same range. Just a little more intense, a little louder, but these have the same range. But if we look at big Growlin Sax, you can see the range is just shifted a bit. So we have, we can only go down to this E flat. We go all the way up a whole tritone higher than the other two libraries. Really deep in the altissimo range. But we don't have the lower range. The growl doesn't really work down there. I mean, in certain styles it does, but the player that we had and the style that they play didn't really lend itself to playing those low notes. And since we were getting so much high stuff, we kind of just shifted the range. So it's really made for up in that kind of higher range tenor saxophone sound. The other thing which maybe you'll notice is vibrato. So Tenor Colossus and atomic tenor are similar in that you can control the vibrato. So you have speed and amount and wait times. So you can see here on tenor I can make it fast and make it slow. You can decide how quickly it does it or if it waits. right? So you can control that. It's all modulation-based vibrato, added after the fact, so you have control. Big Growlin Sax, it's just baked into the way he played. So there's no vibrato control. It's just a part of that sound, pretty much vibrating a lot of the time. Although in smart delay, it's not as intense on some of the faster notes. It's more the long notes that really get the vibrato. I mean, if we listen to this phrase, you can see the longer notes get it. The shorter notes don't get it as much because there's not enough time. But in general, this has the vibrato baked in. You can't control it. One of the biggest differences is going to be how they're loaded. So essentially, Atomic Tenor and Tenor Colossus come with the free version of Kontakt. They work in the free version of Kontakt, which means you don't need to own any other sampler to use it. They'll be in your libraries panel here. You'll be able to load them from there, and you don't need to own the full version of Kontakt to run Atomic, Big Band, and Tenor Colossus. Conversely, Big Growlin Sax, you have to own the full version of Kontakt. So you can see here I've got full version, and it will not appear in the Libraries tab. You will have to load it from either the Files tab, you can see here, or just from the folder you can drag it in. It's a bit cheaper, price-wise than Tenor Colossus and obviously Atomic Big Band. So that's kind of baked into the cost because you will have to own the full version of Kontakt to use it. The other difference is this has our Smart Delay 2.0 situation. If you noticed, when Tenor Colossus and Atomic Big Band are playing, everything is delayed 4 beats. But when you're watching Big Growlin Sax, it's right in sync. So you can see we're in Smart Delay and it's still in sync because of the Smart Delay compensation. So this plugin compensates for the delay, and you just add that to your track. You can see it's here on the Kontakt track, and it makes everything in sync. Atomic Big Band and the other new standard instruments like Tenor Colossus have the 4-beat delay, which when you turn it on, it'll show you this message here that says, you got to move it 4 beats to the left. So that's a difference there. There's a few other small articulation differences. Tenor Colossus, being one of the first libraries we did, doesn't have the swells. If I go to Atomic Tenor and you hear and Big Growlin Sax has them. But we hadn't really thought of it yet when we did Tenor Colossus, so we didn't sample that. So that doesn't have the crescendos. And Big Growlin Sax has these riffs, which were just kind of fun, in the spirit of this really unique sound. We wanted to get some just kind of some little riffs. It was just not usually the kind of thing we do, but we thought it'd be fun with Big Growlin Sax. So that has riffs. There's a few little variations like that make them a little different. But in general, they're all recorded the same. The process is the same. They're just they have a different intention of how they're supposed to be used, or how they're imagined they be used. That's our 3 tenor saxophones and how they're similar and how they're different. We tried to not repeat ourselves too much. We feel like each one, we brought in a specific player to do a certain kind of thing, and they have their own style. If you want that workhorse kind of meat and potatoes tenor saxophone, Tenor Colossus is definitely the one, because you can play ensemble parts, you can play very quietly, you can play exposed solos, that kind of thing. It can do kind of all that. Atomic Big Band, obviously, if you're getting that, you're getting the whole big band, so you want that kind of ensemble sound. It's going to be used in that context really well. Big Growlin Sax is that kind of, it does a pretty specific narrow thing. If you want that high, if you want the growl, if you've got to have the saxophone growl, that's the one. The other ones don't have a growl, and it has that high altissimo range. So if you want that Saturday Night Live theme song kind of vibe, Big Growlin Sax is the one. So I hope that clears it up. This is a question we get all the time. So yeah, thanks for watching.